Now I want you to meet the young man that we sent to Mexico to do this story of the treasure of Pancho Villa for us. Buddy Noonan. Buddy, it looks like you've got some loot already.
Yes, this belonged to one of Pancho Villa's men during the Revolutionary War.
Buddy, how did you happen to select this particular story for treasure?
Well, actually, I didn't select it. It was two of our treasure viewers. Tom Campbell and Ed Ledbetter came to our office with a very interesting treasure map. A treasure map pinpointing the lost cantina where some silver was supposedly buried. And so I thought it would be interesting to join these men and go down to Mexico in search of it.
Where did you start your journey, buddy?
Well, we felt that an aerial reconnaissance would be necessary first, so we headed for Norman Larson's airport out in Van Nuys, California. Here at Van Nuys, we borrowed one of Norman Larson's Beechcraft Bonanza airplanes, and along with it, their ace pilot, Buddy Childers. Buddy brought along his son, Buff, and also on the journey was Dr. Doug Dickinson, an expert on treasure from USC. This crew, along with myself, left Van Nuys Airport, heading for Mexico. And leaving Van Nuys far below, we crossed over the Mexican border and found the rugged Mexican country that we'd heard about. And then we found it, the key city on the treasure map, Temosachek. Now, the treasure map tells us that the cantina is located somewhere between Temosachek and Dolores, a distance of 50 miles, and there's no roads there today. So, taking a bearing on Temosachek once again, we head out in the general direction of Dolores.
Buddy, I imagine by this time you were convinced that this was going to be a mighty rugged journey once you got down into that desert itself.
Very definitely, and we were certainly glad that we were looking at it for the first time from the air. Now, all along our journey, where there were no roads, we found numerous ruins, but for one reason or another, they didn't measure up to the specifications on the treasure map. And then it happened. Halfway between the two towns, we found a ruin, which we felt could very well be the cantina. We marked its location and headed towards the Chihuahua airport, where we're going to meet our ground crew.
Buddy, as I recall it, Chihuahua was more or less the heart of the revolution. Not only that, the home of Pancho Villa himself.
Very definitely. We're going to go into that a little bit later. The town of Chihuahua is very conscious of Pancho Villa. To them, he is a hero. In fact, they've erected a monument to him. Now, in searching for Ed Ledbetter and Tom Campbell, our ground crew, we found that they were on the far end of town talking to a guide, Mr. Rodriguez. And we're surprised to find out that he's heard about this story. We thought we were the only ones knowing about it, but it seems that another survivor of the battle on his deathbed told a story to an American doctor. And he, with this gentleman, went into Mexico in search of it, but they had to turn back because of the bad roads, the same roads we're going to travel. Now, here in Chihuahua is the home of Pancho Villa. And Mrs. Villa still lives here. Yes, she's still alive.
Pancho Villa's wife.
We asked her about the treasure in the cantina, and she hadn't heard about this particular one, although she knew that Pancho had buried many treasures.
Buddy, he was such a colorful character. I imagine it was a thrill for you to be able to walk through the home that he lived in and to be able to talk to the woman that knew him most intimately.
Well, Mrs. Villa could speak pretty good English, and she was kind enough to give us a tour of her home. All along the halls are the bullet holes where the Federales had chased Pancho many times, and in this encasement, she explains to us, is the car that he was killed in. And strangely enough, right next to the car is the patio, the favorite patio of Mr. and Mrs. Villa when they were very young. But as she explains, that was a long time ago. Now he's just a memory. She doubts if any of his treasures ever will be found. But we leave Chihuahua, hoping that perhaps she might be wrong. Our destination now is the town of Temosachek, the key city on the treasure map. And as we head down towards it, we come across those same roads that Mr. Rodriguez told us about, the very bad roads of Mexico, because some of the roads in this area are the worst to be found in all of the world. And hours later, it seemed as though we were constantly crossing through rivers. It kind of seemed like we were burning our bridges behind us. And frankly, Bill, I was getting a little worried.
You don't speak too fluent Spanish, do you, buddy? And
I'm afraid I don't get along very well on my Spanish. And more hours went by, and finally it started to rain, and finally snow.
Snow in Mexico?
Yes, this was only a short time ago, but it was snowing. And believe me, when the dirt gets wet down here, it doesn't turn to mud, it turns to clay, slick clay. And believe me, I didn't know if our car was going to pull through it okay. The old citizens around here prefer to cross these hazardous streams by old-fashioned vehicle, which can't get stuck. And the others use modern vehicle, which always gets stuck this time of the year. So you can see, Bill, why I was getting so worried. We wanted to find that cantina, but at times I wondered if it was worth it.
Particularly since it had been so easy to spot it from the air, buddy, and here it was taking you days now to get to where you were, and you hadn't even reached Temosachek yet, had you?
No, it was a different story from the ground. And then it happened. Our Jeep got stalled out in a river. And while we sent for a tractor to come pull it out, we decided to free some of the frozen clay from our other car.
Buddy, I want to ask you a question. Now, these people are not used to seeing tourists. Were they very friendly at all?
Very friendly. If it weren't for them, we'd probably still be down there now. These people were farmers, workers from the fields around, but they knew we were in trouble. We were miles from the closest city, and so they dropped all of their work to come help us. There was a language barrier. We couldn't speak very much Spanish, but there was a universal language that they knew we were in trouble.
And of course, many of these men were the descendants from the peons who fought for Pancho in the revolution, too.
Yes. And as you can see by the back wheels on our four-wheel drive vehicle, the axle is frozen to the wheel. And then finally it breaks loose. And after the people of Mexico fixed us up, got us ready to go on our journey once again, it renewed the spirit of adventure and treasure in us. And we were all ready again to search for the lost cantina.